and welcome to another UK Column Live on the 3rd of News. Well corrected there, Mike. It was almost as if we went back in time then for a second. Today's date is the 3rd of October 2014. I'm Malcolm Massey. Beside me is the brains of the operation, Mr. Mike Robinson. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How's the weather?
The weather is bright and cloudy, as someone said on the chat box. Not quite sure how that works. And behind in the control panel is Nick. Hello, Nick. How you doing? It's probably not mic'd up. Brilliant. So where do we go through first, Mike? There's been some big things today.
Chris Grayling. We're starting off with Chris Grayling, who joins the list of those that have committed treason in this country, it seems, or he's certainly working towards it. And how has he done that? Well, he's using the excuse of the European Court of Human Rights, which only has jurisdiction in this country because of acts of treason by his predecessors. So he's using that as the excuse to further deny that the constitution of this country exists and the implications of what that means. So let's just be clear. The government's policy agenda is not to remove the madness out of human rights. It's to remove human rights full stop and impose limitations on people rather than inalienable rights as are guaranteed under our constitution. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about a new Bill of Rights and responsibilities. Here's the key point. It's a new Bill of Rights and responsibilities. And this will restore common sense to the application of human rights law, according to this article in The Telegraph, and it should be welcomed. It's going to stop terrorist suspects and other serious foreign criminals using human rights law to block deportation. And the bill will scrap the Human Rights Act introduced by Labour in 1998. I'm not sad to see that go. However, what's coming is not to be sneezed at. So this, I think, has to be seen in the context of David Cameron's speech in the United Nations last week, which has been so much commented on on the internet, various channels. And let's just remind ourselves what he said. The peddling of lies that 9/11 was a Jewish plot, or that 7/7 attacks were staged. The idea that Muslims are persecuted all over the world as a deliberate act of Western policy. The concept of an inevitable clash of civilizations. We must be clear, to defeat the ideology of extremism, we need to deal with all forms of extremism, not just violent extremism. And he talks about non-violent extremism and so on. And of course, he's very clever in that speech because he tries to suggest that anybody that would question the official story of 9/11 is therefore immediately alleging a Jewish plot, which of course is not the case. He's suggesting that anybody that suggests that 7/7 was staged, well, staged isn't the right word, is it? Inside, orchestrated from the inside of government, then they are considered extremists. This new legislation, this new Bill of Rights and Responsibilities, has to be seen in the context of that speech, because what we're not talking about is giving people more liberties or more rights. We're talking about restricting people's liberties and restricting people's rights, even to the point of free speech.
Or even defining people's rights, so that people can operate on their own understanding without having to be told in very meticulous lettering that this is what your rights are.
Right. Yeah. But, I mean, even back in 2010, Chris Grayling here was saying that there's no support from among MPs for a new Bill of Rights. And I suggest that it fairly strongly suggests that we've got to make sure that our MPs know that there is no support for a new Bill of Rights. Our current Bill of Rights is perfectly good. And sorry, guys, I have to remind you again, this conference, this is probably one of the key policy areas that's trying to be pushed on us at the moment from this government. We've got to start understanding what the Constitution is and understanding what we might do to sort this problem. Because they are using the excuse of European legislation and so on to push ever more draconian restrictions and responsibilities on people. And one of the responsibilities that they clearly intend to put on people is the responsibility to keep their mouths shut if they've got any criticism of the government or any criticism of the government constitutional reform agenda.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like if we paint the picture a little bit, we've had the Bill of Rights, what's the European Union version? Sorry, the
European Court of Human
Rights Act. Sorry, so we've had this sort of building up now for 15, 20 years, where we've had stories where I don't know that the human rights has been abused, as some people would say, like with inmates and prisoners being given rights where perhaps like the general public would have said that there were no rights there. For example, prisoners that have sued for hundreds of thousands of pounds because they've been injured during the course of an arrest when they've actually been part of a violent crime themselves. We've had all this craziness building up so that when we get to this point and we start talking about dismantling the European human rights and creating our own new Bill of Rights, everyone accepts it because they want it so desperately, because they see the one that's currently in force is so ridiculous and so stupid and has been sort of used to basically make profit for barristers and lawyers abound, really. And I think
it's classic problem
reaction solution. Yeah, and the fact that it's billed as a new Bill of Rights is crazy, because if we got a new Bill of Rights, we must have an old Bill of Rights. So why aren't we talking about that? Why is that never mentioned in the mainstream media?
This is why the conference and the whole BCG campaign is so important, because you look at all the discussion in the mainstream at the London School of Economics and all the various other constitutional organisations that have been set up in the last 2 or 3 years, and they are restricting the debate, they're restricting the conversation to a very limited set of options.
Yeah.
And none of those options retain any of the rights and privileges and liberties that are guaranteed by that have been guaranteed for 2,000 years, basically, in this country.
Well, I think that's the point, isn't it? Is the current constitution basically it defines it? It's telling us that your rights are not wrongs. So as long as you're not committing a wrong to somebody, you're not harming them, then it has to be fundamentally an inalienable right, right?
It defines them but doesn't limit them.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas by defining a thing, you limit a thing. Quite simply, right? So, like you're saying, by giving like the very definite human rights, then we're very much limiting our own rights.
Let's move on.
Yeah,
because poor old David Cameron was walking through New York and got caught in an open mic situation, basically giving the game away with regard to a personal conversation with the Queen, allegedly. And I have to say, how many times do these contrived situations have to arise before the mainstream media gets that it's a bit of PR? Maybe they know. Yeah. Maybe they've been paid for putting this story in the Daily Mail. I don't know. But David Cameron, as empty-headed as he is, has got plenty of people around him who understand when he needs to talk and when he needs to shut up. And any of these alleged open mic incidents... I did find it amusing that he said that the Queen purred at him down the phone. I wasn't aware that lizards did that, but anyway, sorry about that. Okay, but let's stick with David Cameron, because he's been talking about Afghanistan again, and he's over there because Afghanistan is a new president, and he's over there. He's talking about them, saying UK is a friend and partner of Afghanistan, a strong partner and a good friend. He said he was on an unannounced visit to Kabul. And he said that British armed forces had paid a very high price for their involvement in Afghanistan, and that there is no prospect of the UK going back to fight in Afghanistan because, well, the job's done, as it were. And of course the job is done, and I'm sorry, but we're going to have to come back to this again, because as we can see, in 2001, when the Taliban was in charge in Afghanistan, poppy production was decimated, and therefore opium production was decimated, and therefore the world financial system suddenly lost a major income stream. Something had to be done about that very quickly, and of course what was done, we invaded, and in 2002 the next crop since the invasion, the poppy production went through the roof once again. And look, if we just look at that previous slide once again, the yellow bars, the orange bars are production, and the blue bars are eradication. And any MP, any politician that tries to get up and say that we're doing a great job eradicating poppy production in Afghanistan is either just an out-and-out liar, or they require mental assistance, right? Because it's quite clear that there is no significant eradication going on. And when David Cameron therefore says that Afghanistan is a strong partner and a good friend, it is because they continue to support this poppy production, because opium and heroin is supporting the global financial system at the moment. So this shows the proportion of opium and therefore heroin that's being produced based on the country. And as you can see, Afghanistan, absolutely by far the world's largest producer. And there you go. Now, we've been talking about this for a long time, and so have others. An Afghani MP, as we reported in 2010, claiming that foreign troops were aiding the opium trade. And even going back to before I was joined the UK column, I was talking about this on my personal blog. So this situation of Afghanistan and the opium trade really has to be dealt with. What else can you say? We are now a strong partner with Afghanistan. Job done. We've reinstated the opium trade and reinstated the financial flows, which are keeping the financial system afloat.
Well, you're talking, it's just gigantic business. We're not just talking the heroin trade, we've got the morphine trade. In fact, we've got the whole raft of things that opiates can be used for.
Actually, we don't. And this is the other fascinating aspect of this. We have Afghanistan producing opium poppies, the largest crop on the planet, but the National Health Service can't get enough opium, and therefore we're growing opium poppies in this country to meet National Health Service needs. Right? So normal opiates are not being produced from these opium crops. It's all going to heroin and the illicit drugs trade.
Big business.
Big business, yeah.
Big business. Well, sticking with drugs.
Yes.
Two types of drugs here, really. We're talking about alcohol, but we're also talking about a new type of drug. Well, I say new, it's not actually very new, but it's being billed in the media as a new drug. The think tank NICE has decided that hundreds of thousands of people who enjoy a couple of glasses of wine in the evening are to, and I quote this from the article, to be put on, end quote, a drug to help reduce their alcohol consumption.
What does that mean?
Well, I don't know. What does that mean? I mean, are we talking about, is this just creative license from the for the writer herself, or is this actually terminology that's to be used? Are we to be put on a drug? Because basically, this is according to the announced by the National Institute of Health and Clinical Excellence. The guidelines will also include males drinking 3 pints of beer and will target people who, quote, do not cut down within 2 weeks. And again, that is a direct quote from the article. So what does that mean? Do not cut down within 2 weeks. Does that mean that we are expected to, asked to, requested to? I'm not demanded to. I'm not, or demanded of. I'm not quite sure. GPs are to actively seek out patients who exhibit symptoms related to alcohol use by asking them about their consumption rates, even if they are visiting the surgery for unrelated health matters such as low mood, inability to sleep, diabetes, and high blood pressure. The plans will cost $288 million per year, and it is estimated to save 1,854 lives over 5 years, whilst preventing 43,000 alcohol-related diseases and injuries over the same period. Professor Mark Bellis, alcohol lead for the Faculty of Public Health, said, once again, this is going to increase pressure on the NHS when there are alternatives that would reduce pressure on health services by cutting alcohol consumption. Drinkers will be prescribed with nalmefene, also known as Selincro, if they are consuming 7.5 units per day for men and 5 units per day for women. If they are unable or presumably unwilling to reduce this level following a warning from their doctor or nurse to cut down, then the drug, quote, should be, quote, end quote, prescribed alongside regular advice from a doctor or nurse. In clinical trials, the drug helped people to cut their alcohol consumption from 13.5 units a day to 5 units, a meagre 1.8 units more than regular counselling. So we have a drug that basically doesn't really work any more than counselling, but for some reason we're going to presumably forcibly medicate people who are unwilling to cut their alcohol consumption down.
Of course, by forcibly, of course, you don't necessarily mean we're going to grab them and inject them, but if the doctor says, I'm sorry, but the terms and conditions of access to the National Health Service say that you've got to do this or else we don't treat you for anything else, then that is a form of force.
That's a form of force, yes. Right? It's forcible. And the interesting thing is I looked at the drug, and they're talking about this new drug. Even the title said new drug for mild alcoholics. And actually this drug was developed in the 70s. So the claim that it's a new drug or the first ever drug to combat addiction is wrong. And I thought interesting the side effects. The common side effects are drowsiness, hypertension, tachycardia, dizziness, nausea, and vomiting. So basically, the same symptoms you had for if you drink excessively or if you maybe have 1 or 2 drinks in the evening. So
you get the hangover, but you don't get the
you get all the side effects, but you don't get the fun, basically. But So I a very interesting article. Just the thing that interested me most was the terminology that was being used in the article, because it wasn't people would be encouraged or people might be asked to. It would be, people will be put on, told to, should do.
Yeah, it's all coercion.
All coercion.
Your responsibilities in order to access services.
Yeah. Essentially. Well, that's where we're going, aren't we? We're having this discussion now in the media about, should smokers have access to cancer care? Should people who are obese have access to, to medical care? And we're having this sort of debate now, and I think now we're going down the realms into privatization. I think those aspects of our lives are going to become even more scrutinized.
So basically, at the end of the day, what needs to happen is we need to take control of our own responsibility of our own health. And part 2 of the conference. Sorry, guys, it has to be done. Part 2 of the conference is your health, and again, excellent range of speakers for this. So please, if you're interested in this area, get onto the domuch.biz website and find out more. Okay, beautiful market towns.
Beautiful market towns. So many people who are watching this, I'm sure, are well aware of Agenda 21. And we're all starting to really see it come into action and really happening all around us. And of course, the whole aspect and the whole point of new builds is this is very much a part of the Agenda 21 process. The Chief Executive of English Heritage, Simon Thurley, has suggested that market towns will grow up to 3 times their current size to accommodate large housing estates that are currently being built in response to the country's supposed housing crisis. This is to be expected. The expansion is expected to really take hold by the end of the next election. If we think there has been, quote, if we think there has been a pressure to build houses already, we have seen nothing yet, said Thurley. He then went on to suggest that whichever party came into power would be forced to accelerate building using what he called, quote, draconian measures in order to keep up with the housing crisis. So I thought to myself, well, what housing crisis? Because when I think of a housing crisis, I think there's too many people, not enough houses. That's what I think of the housing crisis. What the government seems to think is a housing crisis is there's not enough affordable houses. So I wonder, well, if we're all being pushed into low pay, low skilled work, and the houses prices are going up, then that makes it a little bit more difficult. So no wonder in their eyes there is a housing crisis. So I thought to myself, I'll look at the homeless figures to see if there's been any major spikes, but I couldn't really see any spikes there, although homelessness sadly is increasing over the last 3 years, with about 185,000 people affected by it. But again, we're talking about a financial problem, not necessarily a housing crisis problem. This is really about house prices being too expensive, not that there isn't enough of them, which would mean that we need to build more. So then I looked at the population. And the Office of National Statistics showed in 2013 we had gained 400,000 people in this country. 212,000 people came from natural births and deaths, and 180,400 people came from immigration. That's now spiked in 2014 to 243,000 people coming into this country and apparently needing homes. So really, when we're talking about the housing crisis, really what we're talking about is that we need to bring more people in from foreign countries into this country in order to water down our culture and to water down, obviously, the political power that we all have, or the power we have within our own constitution. And we need more houses to do that.
But it actually goes way beyond that as well, doesn't it? Because of course we need more houses. We're going to build more houses, but we're not going to build any infrastructure to support those houses. We're not going to build any more power stations. We're not going to build any more water supply. So houses is just a very small part of this. And really, you may have a different view, but my view on this is that they are just attempting to build more housing stock and try to get people in at the bottom of the housing ladder and on the rat race.
Yeah, I think there's definitely that aspect, but I think what's happening at the moment is we're going to see a conglomeration of all these, like sort of like he's saying, like all these market towns. For example, I live not too far from a town called Taunton. When I moved there 20 years ago, was a very small market town. Is now very big. It's grown tenfold. It's gone from 10,000 people to 100,000 people in 15 years. Police stations have all been closed down, like in my area, and they're all being moved to Bridgewater, which is also a town that is growing rapidly. These two towns are only like about, 7 or 8 miles apart.
So they're going to merge?
They're going to merge. And what we're seeing really is the formation of cities. We're not talking about market towns getting bigger. This is Agenda 21. That's what it's all about, folks. It's all about getting people into cities. And if we won't move to cities, which we're not, because we quite like it where we are.
They're just going to flood aside?
They're just going to build the city around us. They just build the city around us, and then that way you're already in the city, basically.
And of course, we know that this constitutional reform agenda is pushing city-states regionalisation, local tax, localism, powers, localism. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, we have our problems, but we have democracy. In Hong Kong, of course, they apparently don't. I wanted to highlight this article in the Wall Street Journal because there was just a little. It was from a couple of days ago, but I didn't see it until today. And there was just a little quote here from John Kerry, because this is saying that China is pushing back against pressure from the West and the US in particular over Hong Kong. And the quote from Kerry is really about as in-your-face and blatant as you like. We believe an open society. That's not a sop to George Soros at all, is it? We believe an open society with the highest possible degree of autonomy and governed by the rule of law is essential for Hong Kong's stability and prosperity. There's so much hypocrisy on so many levels in that statement. It's unbelievable. The rule of law, by the way, in Hong Kong at the moment states quite clearly that the electoral process that the next chief executive of Hong Kong is going to be elected by. Now, of course, the protests are about the fact that people don't agree with that law because they want no restrictions on full voting rights. But whenever Britain handed Hong Kong back to China, there was a roadmap put in place for how quickly those reforms would happen, and that was all agreed at the time. The point here is that the West is absolutely inciting the angst that there is over the speed of these reforms, even though they were already agreed. So, in fact, the rule of law is in place in Hong Kong, and people have the right to protest, of course. But when there are Western organisations, Western money going in to incite that becomes a different situation, doesn't it? But China, fortunately, is attempting to take, or the Hong Kong administration at least, attempting to take some of the heat out of what's going on there. And certainly the protests have calmed down quite a lot today so far because they have agreed to open negotiations with many of the student groups that are involved. They have decided that the best thing to do is to talk. Still plenty of people remaining in and around government offices today, but it's all relatively peaceful. It was all decided very much at the last minute because I guess they felt that they had no option but to actually back down a little bit and at least take the heat out of it, as I say. So that is a reasonably good situation. But why is this going on? Every single day now, we have another article of another country, mainly up and emerging markets, as they're called, getting involved with China. It's almost on a daily basis. So here we've got Ecuador wanting to develop its own satellite capability, and they're taking technology from China in order to do that. They're working with China to develop that and also develop weapons capability. So the West absolutely does not want these little countries having the ability to launch a satellite into space and spy on them. That's only for the CIA to do and the NSA. It's not for anybody else to do. So if we want to know why this revolution is being stoked by Western interests at the moment in China, it's because they want the Hong Kong situation to spread right throughout China and put the kibosh on this whole development program that's going on. Don't know if you've got any opinion on that.
No. I think it's the same. I think there's lots of interesting things emerging from certain countries you might not have expected it to. And I think definitely there's some worried people shifting that the powers might be changing.
Yes, indeed. Right, well, this is quite a staggering headline.
Yeah, I thought it might have been April. I thought I had to double check and check the date to see if it was April the 1st, but sadly not. So basically, A-level students will now be expected to study the literary masterpieces of alleged comedian Russell Brand and rapper Dizzy Rascal. This is the brainchild of the OCR exam board along with the English and Media Centre, who believe that young adults will gain valuable knowledge from studying Russell Brand's evidence on drugs policy. I'm sure they will. Students will also study snippets from The Secret Footballer along with tweets posted by the broadcaster and columnist Caitlin Moran. So, we're going for quality here, Mike. It's quality education that we're going for. Those responsible for this claim that the aim for the new A-level qualification of combined English language and literature offers something special and enables students to analyse any text, whether spoken or written, literary or non-literary, in the most appropriate way. So Paul Dodd, who was the Director of Reform at OCR, there's so much reform going around these days, it's hard to keep up. Quote, our aim in creating the specification was to produce a course with a rich, diverse mix of content, including highly regarded contemporary texts as well as long-established works that will inspire and engage a new generation of students.
It never ceases to stagger me where we are getting our role models these days.
Well, indeed. I mean, I think that, obviously Russell Brand's someone who's been shoved in the limelight and is sort of playing a different tune, and maybe is a bit of a Pied Piper himself, I would imagine. I kind of worry that kids are going to be reading into his drugs policy. That's kind of a bit concerning for me. I looked at the English and Media Centre, and this is basically a third sector charity. So we're talking about private governance again, like private individuals who are unelected, unaccountable, getting in and making policy that is affecting our lives, our children's lives, etc., etc. And this obviously fits in with the OCR reform, because government reform is all about privatisation and getting in people who are non-elected and non-representative and non-accountable. So, I think it's a real sad day for education, really. Sorry, Russell, but true. It's really sad that this would actually be held up as something for children to study and emulate.
Okay, and finally, I thought we would leave on an absolute high note, because this has got to be great news for David Cameron, at least, or for anybody actually that has ever read 1984, because according to this article, which can only be described as a pro-war propaganda piece, perhaps, RAF strikes in Iraq. Analysts say ISIS defeat will mean lengthy campaign. So what have we got here? They're basically saying, I'll just quote a little bit. David Cameron, his Foreign Secretary and Defence Secretaries Philip Hammond and Michael Fallon have been at pains to stress that bombing would not be enough to defeat ISIS. So we're going to bomb them, but that's not going to be enough to defeat them. But we're not going to put boots on the ground because we don't have the support for that. So basically, we're not going to be able to defeat them, is what's being said here, and therefore the Royal United Services Institute has come out and said, this will be a persistent but low-intensity campaign waged over a number of years. So now we know the policy, folks. The policy is for a persistent and low-intensity threat, ISIS, which will be persistently propagandized and by the mainstream media in a low-intensity kind of way. So we're just going to have this constant nudging, this constant feeding that we're going to be attacked by ISIS at any moment, but we can't afford to really destroy them. So they're just going to be there for the next 20 years. They're just a constant enemy to be scared of, if we permit ourselves to be scared of them. And that seems to be the policy. And
I think in many ways we've gotten rid of most of the perceived enemies. We've bombed most of them, and we're kind of running out of targets now. So the
real enemies are in the cabinet and the leaderships of all the main parties, as far as I can see, and we've got to get rid of them. Without getting rid of them, we are going to be continuing with this kind of nonsense for generations. So, and the next generation, based on what you've just read out, isn't going to be well enough educated to understand the difference between what is happening now and what has happened in the past, and how this country should be governed, and the relationship between individuals and the state. The state is supposed to be there to protect us, not to turn us into terrorists, not to
dumb us down, poison us,
kill us. In fact, in hospitals. So. Yeah, what can you say? Sorry to leave on that note. I'll say that Brian is the guest on Doomwatch tonight, so please join us at 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. for that. And sorry for the shortened news today, 30 minutes instead of 45, but that's us for today.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say a big thank you again to everyone who supports us with the T-shirts. I'd also just add a third plug for the conference, just to say, look, we're really trying to reach out people that don't get this, they don't understand, they don't really understand what the Constitution is. The Constitution is really powerful. It really does give us a lot of tools in dealing with these sorts of people. So people are out there on a limb and they're feeling a little bit lonely and whatever, they need to understand what the Constitution is. You guys listening and watching may understand this, but your friends and that may not. And the conference, there are some fantastic speakers who know the Constitution really well, and they will do a very good job to educate people, and that's really important. And that's the bit that we all play, is that we need to get this information out. Really important. Otherwise, our kids are going to grow up thinking that Russell Brand is a hero, and I don't think that's a good idea. So please do help us to spread this word and to promote the conference for us in November.
Well done. Okay. See you on Monday. Thank you.